His wife and daughter left him alone in the toughest battle of his life, a fight against a serious cancer diagnosis. Years later, they returned, seeking inheritance, but what they didn't expect was the surprise waiting for them. Alejandro was a strong and focused man, but his life took a drastic turn when he was diagnosed with advanced Hodgkin's lymphoma. This was a devastating blow for a man who had always maintained a healthy lifestyle, paying close attention to balanced nutrition and never missing an annual medical checkup. However, when the oncologist broke the news, there was no clear explanation for the origin of the disease. Still, the doctor offered a glimmer of hope, mentioning a small chance of overcoming the illness through intensive chemotherapy. Before we continue, if you're a new visitor, I'd like to thank you and invite you to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with all new content. With strong determination, Alejandro decided to undergo the treatment despite its challenges. When the time came to share this life-changing news, he gathered the two people closest to his heart: his wife, Juana, his partner of 15 years, and his teenage daughter, Camila. He said to them, "I have something important to tell you. I visited the doctor and it's confirmed. I have cancer." When he revealed his health condition, he saw a mix of shock and sadness on their faces, which mirrored his own feelings. Yet, he found the strength to reassure them, saying, "Don't worry, I know we'll get through this." However, a big question lingered in his mind. How would the treatment affect his life? Juana hugged him as he thought about the doctor's words regarding the immense challenges that would come with chemotherapy and how it would impact his body and spirit. Like many relationships strained by the pressure of a serious illness, Alejandro worried about how this would affect his bond with Juana. He confessed to her, "Despite what I've said, I feel some fear." Juana, the woman who shared not only his bed but also his deepest struggles, reassured him firmly, "Do you remember our wedding vows? In sickness and in health? That's a promise I intend to keep until the end." Alejandro was able to focus on his recovery without the burden of financial worries, thanks to his savings, strong health insurance, an inheritance from his grandfather, and guaranteed income. His family had a financial safety net for such circumstances. The home where he had built memories with his family and watched his daughter Camila grow up was fully paid off. Even Camilla's academic future was secured, with funds set aside to ensure her education in case of the worst. After arranging all practical matters, Alejandro began his chemotherapy journey just 1 week after the diagnosis. Each session pushed him to his limits, testing his endurance and leaving him exhausted, barely recognizing his weakened body. Returning home after each session became a ritual of triumph over pain. Simple daily tasks like eating, showering, or walking turned into daily battles against an invisible enemy draining his energy. Juana and Camila didn't hesitate to provide him with all the care and love he needed. They took over all household responsibilities, preparing meals with extra care, accompanying him to every chemotherapy session, and ensuring no medication or treatment was missed. Every gesture and supportive glance reaffirmed their unwavering commitment. The disease might shake his body, but it would never shake the love that bound them together. Despite the pressure his health condition could cause at home, Alejandro tried to remain as independent as possible, using moments of energy to handle tasks he could manage. This effort to maintain independence lasted for 2 long months. However, during this time, he noticed a change in Juana and Camila's behavior. The atmosphere of solidarity began to tense, with noticeable sighs preceding moments when Alejandro asked for help. He particularly noticed that Camila, his young daughter, started to withdraw. Sometimes she ignored simple requests like bringing him a glass of water or joining him for a short walk in the yard. One morning, when Alejandro was late for a chemotherapy session, Juana suggested he take a taxi. The suggestion was delivered coldly and directly, surprising him, but he accepted without argument. Upon returning home, it became clear the emotional distance between them was growing day by day. After a few hours of rest and regaining his energy, Alejandro decided to confront the issue and initiate an honest conversation with his wife and daughter. They all sat around the dining table, and he began speaking in a calm but serious tone. "I'll be honest with you. I've noticed some changes in your behavior. If there's something I need to know, please be truthful with me." Juana looked at him with tired eyes and said, "Darling, it's not that we're downplaying your suffering, but honestly, we're exhausted from handling all the daily responsibilities on top of dealing with your health condition." Camilla nodded in agreement with her mother's words. Alejandro responded gently, "I completely understand, and I hate having to ask for help with everything. So I've thought of a solution that might ease the burden on you both. We could hire a nurse to assist me. Many people do this, even my uncle did after his hip surgery." Despite their initial hesitation, Juana and Camila agreed to his proposal. The following week, the new nurse, Romina, began working at their home. However, what Alejandro expected to be a solution ended up adding more complications. He noticed tension on Juana's face, sensing jealousy and discomfort from having another woman in their home permanently, even if she was there to help. It was clear that this feeling was affecting her relationship with Alejandro. Alejandro noticed this change and tried to fix the situation. He said to her, "Darling, maybe you can take back some of the daily tasks if you prefer. We can share responsibilities with Romina." But this initiative didn't achieve the desired result. Instead of easing the tension, misunderstandings between the couple persisted. Amidst all these mixed emotions and miscommunications, Alejandro received an unexpected phone call. On the other end was his mother-in-law, who expressed her displeasure about another woman being in her daughter's home. She said angrily, "Alejandro, I don't understand how you can allow a stranger in my daughter's house. Don't you realize what people might think?" Alejandro tried to explain the situation calmly. "I completely understand your concerns, but Romina is here only to help me. It's about my health, and I'm grateful for all your support." Despite his attempts, the call served as another reminder of the difficulties he faced, not just in his battle against the disease, but also in maintaining his family's balance. His mother-in-law insisted, "Alejandro, I understand your situation, but think about what the neighbors will say. I don't want my daughter to be the subject of gossip." She ended the discussion firmly, leaving Alejandro feeling as though every decision he made carried unexpected consequences. In the midst of this emotional storm, Alejandro clung to the only refuge he had left, focusing on his health and hoping for better days when physical complications wouldn't mirror emotional ones. He calmly and firmly explained to Juana, "I understand your concerns, but you need to trust me. This is only temporary, and right now, I need Romina's help." Juana replied, "All right, I'll accept it," though it seemed she had resigned herself to the situation. On an ordinary day, after the exhaustion of a chemotherapy session, Alejandro found himself facing a scene that would be etched in his memory forever. A moving truck was quietly parked in front of his house. He approached Juana and asked with a mix of surprise and fear, "What does this mean?" She replied coldly, "Well, Alejandro, this is the best solution I've found. Camila and I are going to live with my mother during your recovery. If you need anything, ask Romina." Stunned, Alejandro asked, "Are you really leaving me like this?" She replied indifferently, "As you said yourself, it's only temporary." Then she turned and continued loading things into the truck with a resolve that seemed unshakable. In that moment, Alejandro felt torn between deep sadness and difficulty, expressing the confusion overwhelming him. Exhaustion acted as a thin veil, slightly softening the intensity of the pain, perhaps as a defense against a reality that would otherwise be unbearable. Alone in his home, now eerily quiet without the laughter and warmth of his family, Alejandro faced the hardest moment of his life. His journey, marked by a struggle against illness, was filled with challenges that went beyond the physical. Romina not only provided the necessary medical care, but also offered kindness and attention. When the bell rang at the hospital, signaling the end of his treatment and physical recovery, it wasn't just the end of an exhausting treatment. It was the beginning of a new chapter in his life. That moment symbolized liberation from a relationship that hadn't offered the unconditional support expected between partners. Alejandro's decision to unilaterally file for divorce wasn't just a legal procedure. It was a declaration of self-worth and his right to live with dignity and peace. He prepared all the legal documents and sent them to his mother-in-law's address. Now Alejandro could build his future, focusing on physical and emotional recovery, surrounded by people who had shown true empathy and support during his toughest times. Over a year had passed since he overcame the illness, and Alejandro felt ready to move forward. He reached out to his former company, which agreed to reinstate him under the condition that he could work from home if he wished. Alejandro accepted the offer, but despite his love for his home, many bad memories were tied to it, making him desire a fresh start in a smaller, quieter place. So he decided to gift the house to Romina, who had been a great support during his darkest moments. Moving to a new neighborhood was more than just a change of address. It represented a new beginning and an opportunity to rewrite his story after a painful and challenging period. As for his new hobby, woodworking meant more to him than just a craft. It was a form of therapy. Searching for new tools symbolized his continuous pursuit of new skills and experiences to help shape his new reality. Although Alejandro had moved past the absence of his wife and daughter, the fact that he hadn't heard any news about them remained a prominent point in his story. This gap in his life indicated that, despite his recovery and progress, some unresolved issues lingered. He sometimes wondered if there would ever be another chance for conversation or perhaps inner peace regarding his past. One ordinary day, after returning from a hardware store, Alejandro was surprised to find Milena, his new neighbor whom he had met just days ago, waiting at his gate. She looked worried and had something important to say. She called out to him in a soft but serious voice. "Alejandro, there's something very important I need to tell you. I need you to listen carefully." Alejandro stopped placing the bags of materials on the ground and looked at her attentively. He knew Milena wasn't the type to speak without good reason, which made him anxious about what she might say. They sat on a wooden bench in the small garden in front of his house, where Milena gathered her courage to begin. She said quietly, "I've heard something that might concern you, about your former family, your ex-wife and daughter." These words made Alejandro's heart race. He wasn't sure if he wanted to hear more, but at the same time, he felt the need to know the truth, no matter what it was. Milena continued, "Yesterday, while I was returning home, I saw two women, one older and one younger, heading toward your house. They knocked on the door several times, and when they didn't find anyone home, they got into their car and waited for a while before leaving." Alejandro asked, "Is this true?" Milena replied, "Yes, I thought about calling the police, but since they might be your relatives, I didn't want to interfere. Since they didn't return, I decided to tell you now." Alejandro felt a chill run down his spine as Milena described the women. The descriptions matched his ex-wife and daughter. A strange feeling of confusion and anxiety took over his thoughts. How did they find their way here? He wondered quietly. In the end, no one knew about his new location except his brother and sister-in-law. Alejandro began recalling past details, trying to understand the motive behind their sudden appearance. Milena, known for her rational mind, suggested that if they returned, it would be best for him to avoid confrontation and let her handle the situation. Alejandro had no desire to revisit the pain caused by their rejection, especially now that the memories of that lonely and heartbreaking period were vivid and clear in his mind. As night fell, Alejandro decided to seek answers. He called his brother Gael for an explanation. "Gael, something strange happened. Milena says she saw two women near my house." "I think it's them." Gael responded with concern. "Alejandro, I needed to talk to you. Juana and Camila are back. Are you sure about what you're saying?" Alejandro confirmed, "Yes, I'm at your house now with Romina. When they found out you transferred the house to Romina, they were furious. They broke some things in the garden and threatened her. Romina called me, so I came. You need to be careful. Don't let them find you." Alejandro felt a sense of relief when he remembered that Romina was legally protected. All the documents proved that the house had been fully transferred to her name, a step Alejandro had taken carefully to close that chapter of his life definitively. He contacted his lawyer to review the documents and ensure Romina was fully protected from any attempts to reclaim the house. How could these people who had chosen to abandon him in his weakest moments return now to claim something they no longer had any right to? Alejandro called Romina directly. It was clear from his voice that he hadn't expected this. "I didn't know this would happen," he said. Romina replied, "But there's something I need to tell you. When they came here, we had a long and intense discussion. In a moment of tension, I told them you had passed away and left the house to me. Somehow they managed to get your new address. I didn't know things would escalate this far. I was just trying to make them leave you alone." Alejandro took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "It's okay. This was bound to happen sooner or later. Thank you for trying." The next morning, while Alejandro was busy with his daily tasks, he heard repeated knocks on the door. He quickly checked the security camera screens and found confirmation of what he had feared. His ex-wife was standing at the door, her features still familiar as he remembered them. His daughter, Camilla, had grown into a young woman, her height and features revealing how much time had passed since their last meeting. Following the plan he had agreed upon with Milena, Alejandro stayed inside and didn't open the door. However, he moved close enough to hear parts of the conversation taking place outside. Milena, with her friendly and diplomatic personality, stepped out of her house and approached the two women with a warm smile, leaving the past burdens behind. "Hello, how can I help you? Are you new to the neighborhood?" The women replied, "Yes, we're here temporarily. Have you lived here long?" Milena responded, "You could say that. Do you need anything?" The ex-wife said, Actually, we're trying to find a man named Alejandro. He used to live in this house." Milena kept her composure and answered calmly, "Oh, Alejandro. I don't know anyone by that name here. Maybe he moved away a long time ago." As Milena politely answered their questions, Alejandro watched the situation unfold from inside. During the conversation, his ex-wife began spinning a story about her husband, or rather, her ex-husband, claiming he had lived in the house and later died in the hospital. These words shocked Alejandro, who was watching everything from inside, as there was no evidence of his death, nor was there any connection to the hospital he knew well. Clearly, this story was nothing but a fabrication by Romina, who had tried to protect him by any means necessary. Milena, calm and clear in her responses, said to them, "Yes, Alejandro did live here a few months ago, but unfortunately he passed away due to lymphoma. He sometimes spoke about moving here after being abandoned by his former life partner." She added quietly, "To my knowledge, Alejandro planned to leave all his assets to charities since he had no close family except his brother." This statement seemed to hit the two women like a new shock. Milena continued, offering practical advice. "If you want to take any legal steps, it starts with obtaining the necessary documents like a death certificate or will. Then you can go to the public records for more information." However, their reactions were far from calm. The ex-wife raised her voice and said angrily, "This is none of your business." Her loud voice and insults directed at Milena caused a commotion, disturbing the peaceful and supportive neighborhood. As Alejandro hid behind the walls of his home, he felt ashamed and anxious about his ex-wife's aggressive behavior. There was a deep desire within him to confront this hostility, but he decided to remain silent temporarily to avoid escalating the situation. Days later, Alejandro met with Milena and apologized. "Milena, please forgive me for what my ex-wife did. I wish I had been as calm as you, but I know all too well what she's capable of when she's angry, and I fear she'll return soon." Milena smiled reassuringly and said, "Don't worry, Alejandro. We're here to support you, and we won't let anything disrupt your new life." The next day, while Alejandro was at home drinking his coffee, he heard the sound of his garden window breaking. When he went out, he saw two elderly neighbors trying to calm down his ex-wife and prevent her from causing further damage. Alejandro said to them, "You broke the promise to stand by me in sickness and in health. You abandoned me when I needed you most." At that critical moment, the police arrived and quickly intervened, arresting Juana and Camila, ending the scene before it escalated further. Alejandro didn't hesitate for a moment and confidently told the officer in charge, "Yes, officer, I want to go to the station with you in the same car that's taking them." Alejandro began searching for answers to explain this aggressive behavior. It didn't take long for him to discover that the recent death of Juana's mother, had been the main trigger for this sudden return. Her mother's death had been the turning point that catastrophically changed the course of events, forcing her and her daughter to leave the home they had been living in. When Alejandro decided to sell the house he owned, the mother and daughter found themselves homeless. They tried to sell their remaining family possessions to secure some money, but it wasn't enough to cover their expenses. They ended up in a modest hotel, sharing a small room barely big enough for both of them. A miserable situation they weren't used to. When they returned to Alejandro's old house, they were in for a shock. Romina greeted them and calmly but firmly explained that the house had been officially transferred to her name and that Alejandro no longer had any connection to the property. This news was a bombshell for them. They weren't sure if Alejandro was alive or not, and those doubts drove them to attempt to break into the house and check for themselves. Everything ended dramatically with the mother and daughter finding themselves involved in cases related to intentional vandalism, attempted break-ins, and assault with threats. As for Camilla, who was still a minor, she was sentenced to community service to correct her behavior, such as cleaning public parks and working in children's libraries. The mother faced a harsher punishment due to the deliberate and calculated nature of her actions. These penalties served as a reminder to them that the consequences are severe when boundaries are crossed. And so, Alejandro realized that life gives him new opportunities to start over, and that those who think they can take advantage of others always end up losing more than they expected. These are life's lessons. Those who are sincere in their dealings always find support, while those who play with others' emotions end up alone in the end. If you love the story and it stirred mixed emotions in you, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to encourage us to bring more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to stay updated with all new content. Until next time, in a new story.